Transfiguration because of the story. Because in the story, when they go up the mountain and Jesus is praying, he is transfigured in that he looks different from what he looked like going up the mountain. There's a glow in his face. His raiment starts to look very white and glowy and shiny. And so that's how we got this name of Transfiguration. Now, there are a few things that are interesting about the story as it compares to Moses. The first thing is that the place you have to go to get transfigured is the mountaintop. And when we read in the book of Exodus that Moses had to go up the mountain, he was going up to receive the Ten Commandments. And when he went up, he had to meet God face to face in a way. And God had set it up in such a way that Moses could never see his face, but only get a glance of him as he's walking away. But that's enough. That's all you need to be transfigured. It's all you need to glow and to shine and to be full of light. And when Moses comes down from the mountain, the glow on his face, the glow on his skin, the glow that the aura that surrounds him, the light around him is so blinding that he has to wear a veil. The people cannot bear to look at him. It's too bright. So he has to wear a veil. So that's the story that grounds the gospel story that we're telling today. Jesus takes James and John and Peter up the mountain, because that's where you have to go. And he goes there to pray. And prayer is Jesus meeting with God. Just as Moses went up to get stones of tablet, he actually was instructed to cut the stones and bring them up the mountain with him. I'm sure they had to be written on, and so they had to be quite large. They would have been heavy, and he had to climb the top of a mountain with 2 stones. Jesus had to take friends. Jesus had to take Peter, which is a bit of a burden too, from time to time for Jesus. So Jesus takes Peter, James, and John up the mountain, and while he's praying, there is, again, like with Moses, a transfiguration. There's a lightening of his aspect. There's a glow that surrounds him. And the disciples see this, and they find it to be, it's surprising, but when it's something you've never seen before, it can be rather unnerving and rather frightening. And probably because of the energy in that space, the defense mechanism of the body is to shut down. And so we read that they became very sleepy, that their eyes, their heads became very heavy, and yet they managed to stay awake. And they managed to see Elijah and Moses standing with Jesus. Now, this is what I understand to be the kingdom. Okay? In the previous story, I'm going to see if I can pop that up. When Jesus is talking to his disciples, and it's quite clear, it's his disciples. And it could mean only the apostles, but it could mean the crowd that has been building over the weeks of his ministry, and he now has kind of a following. And he's talking about the kingdom of God, and he's saying there are those among you who will not see death before they have seen the kingdom. And the common interpretation of these words is that the kingdom of God, that once Jesus has been crucified and risen, because these stories are always told after the fact, that God's kingdom would return very, very, very soon, maybe within a generation. But as I was reading this over last night, it occurred to me that what Jesus is saying is, there are those of you, namely Peter, James, and John, who will not taste death before they have seen the kingdom of heaven. So when those three go up the mountain with Jesus, and they stand in the presence of Moses and Elijah and Jesus in this incredible, intense experience of light, where they have gone is the kingdom of heaven. They are the ones who will not taste death before they have seen the kingdom. And they see it on the top of the mountain. Now, in a lot of cultures and in a lot of religions, the idea of going up a mountain is symbolic of going into the heavens. It's for Moses, it's where you meet God face to face. For the disciples, for the three apostles, it's where they meet God face to face in the glowing face of Jesus, the glowing aspect of Jesus. They have reached the kingdom by coming to the top of the mountain with Jesus. So that's number one. The kingdom of heaven, symbolically, is the top of the mountain where you meet true, pure light face to face. Now, we have the story that when Moses came down the mountain, he brought with him the law, the commandments, carved into two large stone tablets. When Jesus comes down the mountain, he brings something else. They evidently spent the night at the mountain. The story says that they came down the next day, and the crowd was waiting for them to come down the mountain, and a man came forward and begged for Jesus to heal his son. So while Moses came down from the mountain and brought healing, or brought the law, Jesus comes down the mountain and brings healing, brings grace, brings the restoration of our souls. So, in the Old Testament, the light on Moses' face can represent law, but also wisdom. In the New Testament, the light represents love. Okay? He comes down in light, he brings healing. With attitude, I might say. Because he was a little frustrated. It seems like I've been with you a while, teaching you everything I know, and you still can't heal a child of epilepsy or whatever you might have. Called everybody a perverse generation. Clearly, when you come back down the mountain, it can put you in a mood, perhaps. It can put you in a mood. Especially when you've been keeping company with the greats at the top of the hill. Can you imagine that? The euphoria of that experience. Coming down the mountain and seeing all these people clamoring to see you, and somebody says, your disciples couldn't heal my son. And it's like, back to real life. It's like waking up from a wonderful dream and going, oh, that's right, it's Monday. So understand, and I think by including that dynamic in the story, part of the story is yes, absolutely God, yes, absolutely human. Absolutely human. He can touch a child. He can rebuke a demon. He can bring the new creation, the new order into every moment of that day. And then he can go, you perverse generation. It's all part of that Jesus phenomenon, that Jesus presence, that is as fully human as fully divine. He is the bearer of light. He is the bearer of light. And in those few words, he's telling us that, yeah, even the bearer of light gets a little ticked off sometimes. It's okay. Because what I am giving you is the gift of light. The the gift of love and the gift of creation. Go back to the beginning. The first creation of God was light. And God said, let there be light. So light is the beginning of everything. Light can be said to symbolize the creative power that brought everything into being. The light could be said to symbolize the Big Bang, the beginning of everything, from which everything has been created, has evolved, and become what it is in this moment. So, what comes down the mountain to the people of God is light. Light as law and wisdom. Light as love and healing and grace. Now, in our prayer this morning, we heard that Jesus came to renew our humanity so that we can share in his divinity. No one stays on the top of the mountain, at least not in this religious tradition. You gotta come down, because that's where the people are. That's where the illness is. That's where corruption is. That's where oppression is. That's where jealousy is. That's where vengeance is. It's all at the bottom of the mountain. So when you have had your mountaintop experience, when you have come from a time of being in that pure, overpowering presence of God, you have to go down the mountain, and then you have to do the work. You have to go down the mountain, and then you have to do the work. And what is the work? The work is feeding the poor. The work is freeing the prisoner. The work is healing the ill. The work is standing against oppression and corruption. The work is visiting the prisoner. The work is gathering up your clothes and donating them. The work is volunteering at a food bank. The work is kneeling down to someone who's lying homeless on the street and touch them on the shoulder and say, "Are you okay, brother? Let's go have a sandwich. Is there anything I can do for you?" And that is when the light comes into the world through the renewed humanity, sharing Jesus' divinity. We are the light of the world because we have been to the mountaintop with Jesus. And so we know what the kingdom of God should look like. And so we know what we need to do next.